Okay, hello. Hope you guys can hear me okay. Just shout if you can't hear me, but hopefully you can. Got my headphones on. Welcome to today, and welcome to the Zoom call, I guess. But big welcome wherever you're joining from. Just introduce myself. My name is Nathan. I am also a final year medical student, probably much like lots of you here. I'm currently a final year medical student at Brighton, and I'm part of the Tams team. So very nice to meet you, I guess, although obviously virtually. And yeah, welcome again. Like I said, welcome to today. I hope you are going to. I'm sure you are going to enjoy it, and very, very beneficial. Before I get into sort of today and everything that's going to happen today, I will just talk a bit about sort of background and about Tams in general. So I'm sure you probably might know a little bit, but maybe not as much. I thought I'd just give you a bit of an intro. As I'm part of the Tams team. And so essentially, what is Tams? So Tams is a registered community interest company, initially formed in 2018. With the aim of supporting students from sort of non-typical backgrounds who want to study medicine. So that's from students and secondary school students. And sort of since then, we have expanded to supporting current medical students as well, which is where we sort of come in today with this talk. The talk is run by sort of the Tams network admin team, which is sort of one of the teams at Tams, and we'll talk a bit about that at the end. We'll have a video to show you. Essentially, this today is part of a series of talks for final years across the country and so final year medical students. And we also know that it can bring us anxiety final year. I know for me, particularly being a final year, it's quite stressful, not going to lie. And I'm sure you might feel the same. I don't know. If you don't, that's good, I guess. But yeah, no bring anxiety. I think these talks essentially are aimed to sort of kind of quell those anxieties almost, and sort of help with the process basically. So yeah, last week we actually had a talk on the PSA, which was very, very informative and useful. As for today, I'm sure you know it's today about SJT and preparing for the SJT, which again we know is coming up very soon for a lot of students. So if I'm bringing trigger warnings, if I'm triggering you a little bit, but kind of have to, tell you the truth. But yeah, essentially, again, like I said, praying for SJT. We have a great speaker lined up. Feel free to ask questions throughout the talk via the chat function at the bottom. Hopefully you're familiar with Zoom, so you know where that is, but it's at the bottom right in the middle. And interact via the chat if needs be during the talk. We will have the Q&A at the end of the session, so you can ask your questions throughout the talk if you wish, but the questions won't necessarily be answered during the talk, probably after the talk. There are any specific questions regarding SJT stuff, basically. But I hope that all made sense. Just going to introduce the speaker now, our speaker for today. So we have Dr. Olivia Ray. And so Olivia is essentially a academic foundation year 1 doctor in Sheffield. She is an Exeter alumni, so went to Exeter Medical School. And essentially we're talking today about the SJT, as I said before. So if you'd like to take away, Olivia, I'll just pass it on to you.
Hello, hi. Are you able to hear me okay? Yeah, great. All right, so I will just share my PowerPoint screen and we will get going. All right, so I'm going to presume you can see that, and if you can't, please can you say now? All right, okay. So today we're going to talk about the SJT. So I thought we'd start with some facts before we get into the SJT. So last year, 7,500 people applied for the foundation programme. So that is represented. So here I've got 750 dots on the screen. So each one of those is about 10 people that applied, roughly. These purple dots over here, you can see, that's the 700 people who applied for the specialist foundation schemes. So things like the academic programme, the psychiatry programme, the priority programme. They just need to pass the SJT in general. For everybody else, all of these green and red dots, your SJT score matters. That's quite scary. There's quite a lot of people that could compete against. There is some good news. All of these green dots, so about 75% of the people who are in the normal foundation programme got their first choice of deanery. So they did well enough on their SJT and with all the other scores to get their first choice. So actually that's pretty reassuring. These other people, the people that are in red, the 25% who didn't get their first choice, actually most of them did get their second or third choice. So the odds are definitely in your favour. Right, if we go to the next slide, we can see exactly how much the SJT matters. So this is how the ranking works, which I'm sure you have looked at before, but I just thought I'd put into a little form, a little bar chart just to demonstrate it. The SJT is worth 50 points, which is quite a lot compared to everything else. You get 33 points just as standard, and then 10 for your med school, 5 for your degrees and 2 for your publications. So your SJT does matter, but the majority of people do well enough on their SJT to get into their first choice deanery. So some good news for today. So today we're going to talk about how do you prepare for the SJT and really what does it mean? So these are the topics we're going to cover. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare initially, what sort of prep work do you want to do? We'll talk through the exam type and the types of questions that they give you, and we'll go through some practice questions with that. So if when we get there, if you want to use the chat to answer your questions and to say your guesses, it totally does not matter if they're right or wrong, we can go with those. We'll talk a little bit just about the logistics of the exam and about what you're doing and what you can and can't do during the exam. And then we'll have some dedicated time for questions, but please, if you've got absolutely any questions during the exam, go for it. Just ask during the exam, during the talk, just go for it and ask, please, on the chat. And Nathan has very kindly said he'll monitor it, so I'll definitely get through them during the chat. Okay, so I didn't realise Nathan was going to introduce me. This is me. I'm Liv, F1 in Sheffield. I'm an AFP in medical education, and I'm a graduate from Exeter Med School. So first of all, we'll just talk about how do you prep for the exam. So what does the SJT mean? So the SJT is a situational judgment test, and essentially it's pretty much a requirement that you pass it to get into the UK Foundation programme. And it's set for two different reasons. One is to do with the foundation programme, and the other one is to do with the GMC, the General Medical Council. So the UK Foundation programme defined the SJT, the situational judgment test, as a measure of meeting the attributes required to be a foundation doctor, as defined in the National Foundation Programme Personal Specification. So they don't really say much, but they say that they're testing you according to some attributes. And when we look at that in more detail, they've got 8 different attributes that they're looking at. I've hyperlinked all of these slides. And so this little document thing in the corner, I don't know if it'll work over Zoom, but we can send the slides out afterwards and those hyperlinks will work. But these are their 8 attributes that they're looking at. They're looking at, can you have the patient as the centre of your care? Can you organise and prioritise your jobs and tasks? Can you work effectively with others being other doctors, but also parts of the MDT team, patients and their families, really? Can you communicate effectively, again, with just about everybody that you're coming into contact with? If we go on to that second row, can you deal with the pressures and challenges, or do you have the ability to deal with the pressures and challenges of an F1 doctor? I think that one's always seems a bit odd, but some of the SJT questions are a bit challenging, and I don't know if Caleb's found the same looking through them, but as an F1, I've looked through a few of them and I go, oh, actually, I have dealt with something really similar to this. So they do turn out to be somewhat helpful. The next one, so all about continuous professional development, and can you keep a task on learning? Can you remember to go to training, to teaching, that sort of thing. Last 2 we're at now, so they're looking for your insight and your self-awareness, your insight into what you can and can't do. At what stage do you need to stop? Do you need to ask for help? Do you need to escalate to others? And can you recognise that that is a state that you need to be in? And finally, can you understand the principles of equality and diversity? And I think by that, they're really talking about professionalism as well. So can you encompass all of what they think it means to be a professional doctor? So those are the foundation program characteristics. But if we move on and have a look, they actually really come down to good medical practice, which is a GMC document, which I'm sure you've all heard of tens of times before. But it is really worth reading. It might not be the most interesting thing, but it's actually a lot shorter than you think it's going to be. And in terms of passing the SJT, it is the document to look at, in my opinion, when you're preparing, because it gives you a lot of the answers. It gives you the guidance. It tells you what the GMC, what the General Medical Council expect of you as an F1 doctor and as a doctor throughout your life, but specifically thinking about the SJT as an F1. And then I wanted to think about, you know, once you've read the GMCs, good medical practice, what are you going to do next? Because actually it gets fairly tricky to find example SJT questions online. And you end up, or I ended up, and I know a lot of my friends did, just repeating the same ones. You feel a little bit like you're going around in circles. So I thought I would try and give you some options here for how to not go around in circles and how to get a good thing. This might be a slide to screenshot if you want to take a look at it later. So we've got the GMC have got their own interactive good medical practice in action. So you can look at that. There's over 60 scenarios you can see there. And that gives you an idea of what to do, what the GMC expect you to do. The thing below is the UK Foundation programme down here. They've got some practice SJT papers. One of those, that first one that is now a purple link because I clicked on it, is an interactive version that is online. And that's actually this one here, this UK FP practice paper that you can do via the Pearson View. They've also got a small selection of sample questions. There's about 3 or 4 questions on that, and 2 different practice papers, practice paper 1 and practice paper 2, which you can do and go through. So those are some really good resources, and you know they're good because they've been created by the people who are running this exam, and they've decided to put those resources out again to keep using those resources. I'll talk about it a little later on, but the question types have changed, but those resources clearly they think are still relevant and still important, and those are the ones I'd really recommend using. The last thing to say is that revising for the SJT, you can go to paid courses, you can buy books, you can, you know, spend money on this exam, but it's absolutely not essential is what I would say. I think there are a fair few people out there who would agree with me. The UK Foundation programmes say the SJT is not an exam that you can be coached for. How true that is and what you want to take of that, I don't know. But there are some resources out there that you can find for free. So I would recommend having a look at your med school library, whether that's an online library or an in-person library with actual books, and seeing what SJT stuff they have available as well. Just in case you feel like you've run out of practice questions and you want to try something else, but you do not want to spend money. And really, I think if you can buy the books, if you can get the books for free from med school, why would you bother buying your own? So we've just spoken a little bit about what the SJT was created for in terms of those attributes, where those attributes have come from and where we can find guidance as students and as doctors, and that's good medical practice. And we've also, I've just put up there some resources that you might want to use to help you revise for the SJT. So I hope that so far is a useful little intro to where the rest of this talk is going. Because where it's going to go now is the practice questions. So what sort of questions are they asking in the SJT, and what do they want us to think about during the SJT? And really, they've got 3 different types of questions that we're going to look at. Before we get to those questions, I want just to give you some general tips for answering situational judgment type style questions. If anyone has got any questions so far in the chat, if you could just place them in, that would be fantastic. I'm sure Nathan will be able to read them out for me and let me know what's going on in there. So thank you, Nathan, in advance in case anyone does. So some general tips for answering SJT questions, and we're going to get to a point where all 9 of these tips are on the same slide. So if you want to screenshot something, that is the slide to go for. So when you sit the SJT, you're a final year med student, yeah? You're sitting it like not even halfway into that year, but you want to pretend and you want to think as if you're acting as an F1. Within that, you know, you recognise that you're an F1, you are not the most senior doctor there, and there are lots of colleagues above you who can help you in terms of the doctor hierarchy, but there are also lots of members of the MDT team, the physiotherapist, the pharmacist, the ward clerk, the nurses, the ward sister who can help you. The other thing you want to remember is that your patient and their safety is your #1 top priority. If you think back to that slide with the 8 boxes on it, the patient focus as the centre of your focus is what the SJT is looking for, and is one of the attributes that you need to show. And my last little thing would be, sometimes you read the scenario and you think, oh God, it's really obvious. I would still recommend reading all of those options through before you decide what to do, and just thinking quickly about each one. They're not created to catch you out, or at least I'd hope they're not, but sometimes there's just something a bit subtle, something a bit tricky that you want to think about in more detail. Okay. My next 3 tips are 3 questions to think about. The first thing I'd say is, what is the question they're asking? What attribute are they looking for? And what are they asking you to do? Are they asking you to act in the most appropriate way at that point in time? Are they thinking about a more long-term and future goal? Are they thinking about you acting within the team? And really, they're thinking about patient safety as their #1 priority, and that should be yours too. Again, what attributes are they looking for? Think back to those 8 boxes. What is this question assessing? And what do you need to show that you are? Are you good at communicating effectively with members of the team? Are you keeping the patient at the centre of your focus? Are you prioritising tasks and organising the jobs effectively? And I think that applies to when you look at the questions too. You can think about, what do each of these options that they're giving me prioritise, especially for some of the multiple choice questions, which we'll look at in a bit. Those different options show something slightly different, and you just need to work out what each of those options is showing or not showing, and whether that makes it a right option or not. Now, I've got 3 more tips just for general SJT questions. They are to check your answer. You want to check, have you put your patient first? I know I've said it about 6 times within the last 3 minutes, but it is really, really important, and it is the key point of the exam. Secondly, is your answer honest? You know, have you, not honest maybe, but honest in the sense of, are you doing the right thing? Have you told the truth? Have you lied to anybody? And are you acting with integrity? Seems like a very vague point, but you know, I think in some of those more nuanced questions, that definitely comes in. All right. So we've spoken through a few different tips just for tackling a general SJT question, but I think next the best thing to do would be to look at the 3 different types of question type. And that's these. We've got multiple choice questions, rating questions, and ranking questions. And you get a mixture of all 3 within that exam. And you are guaranteed to get a mixture of all 3. I'll show you in a minute, but you will get them, so you might as well practice all 3. First, we're going to look at multiple choice. So when you look at your multiple choice questions, it is, I don't know if everyone's, what med schools everyone is at, we had a lot of multiple choice exams at Exeter, and it is essentially the same. They're going to give you 1 question, 1 scenario with 1 question, and give you 8 options of how to act. And when you're thinking about those options, you're doing all 3 within that scenario. So your answer is saying, I would do option X, I would do option Y, and I would do option Z, and you wouldn't do any of the others. You'll see the questions are slightly nuanced as you go through. The options seem to align. Some of the options seem to be very similar, but you want to think, I can only do 3 of these. Which 3 am I going to choose to do? And you definitely are doing all 3, not just 1 or this or that. In terms of the exam itself, there are 37 of these multiple choice questions. There's only 70 questions in the exam, so they make up quite a big chunk of what you're doing. What is that? About over half. There are 4 marks for every option, and you get 12 marks per scenario. So you're choosing 3 things. If you get all 3 right, you get 12 out of 12 for that scenario. If you get 2 of them right, you get 8 out of 12 for that scenario. If you get 1 of them right, you're only getting 4 out of 12 for that scenario. Okay, so I want to do a MCQ first. So with this, if you could put your answers in the chat, I would really, really appreciate it. Okay, because I think if we've got something interactive going, it gives you, even if you're saying the wrong thing, it totally doesn't matter because your SJT isn't tomorrow, or at least it shouldn't be because they start in December. And it just gives you an option, and we can talk through why that might be wrong or why it might be right as well. Okay. So first of all, we're going to look at the scenario, and I'll read it out to you just in case. So you review a patient on the surgical ward who's had an appendectomy done earlier on the day. You write a prescription for strong painkillers. The staff nurse challenges your decision and refuses to give the medication to the patient. Choose the 3 most appropriate actions to take in this situation. So you're doing 3 of these all together. If we think about the key words in that scenario, they are challenges, refusers, and your patient. So your patient is your number 1 priority, and this is all about how do you deal with challenges and how do you communicate with other people and work effectively in a team. These are our options. As I'm reading these out, if there are any that you think are really obvious, pop them in the chat as to what you would go for. You get to choose 3. If you can only think of 2 that sound really good, just pop those 2 in, that doesn't matter. So are you going to instruct the nurse to give the medication to the patient? Discuss with the nurse why she disagrees with the prescription? C, ask a senior colleague for advice? D, complete a clinical incident form? E, cancel the prescription on the nurse's advice? F, arrange to speak to the nurse later to discuss your working relationship? G, write in the medical notes that the nurse has declined to give the medication? Or H, review the case again? So as soon as you think one of those is correct, just pop it in. It doesn't matter, like I said before, if you're right or wrong, but I'd really appreciate it if we've got some interaction. Okay, someone has, if you just want to put it in the chat to everybody, that's great, as opposed to direct message, but it's totally fine if you want to direct message me instead, just in case people look at your answer and think, oh, it's totally wrong, then you're very welcome to. All right, so I think we've got quite a good consensus there. A lot of people have gone for B and C. And then there's some choice as to whether you should go for G or for H. So if we look at what the correct answer for this question is, B and C are definitely correct. Discussing why instead of challenging is really nice, and asking a senior colleague for advice is knowing where your limits are and escalating to seniors and asking for help. H is slightly better than G. So G is right in the medical notes the nurse has declined to give the medication. You could probably get around that first. That comes a bit later if this scenario continues and continues and continues. Better still is just to review it all again. Is it because you've accidentally prescribed a really strong painkiller? Okay, and I suppose you've got that when you're discussing with the nurse, but you're doing all 3 of these at the same time. So that was really good. So well done to everybody. I think most of you definitely got 8 points in that, and that's a great place to start now. Next, we're going to talk through the rating questions. Now, these, I think, sometimes feel a little bit more straightforward because you've only given 1 option at a time. I'll show you how it works. So there's 18 of these questions, and you get given 1 response which you rate as in this answer is either very appropriate, somewhat inappropriate, or inappropriate. Okay? Again, there are 18 scenarios here, and you get 4 marks every time you answer something correctly. Okay? And you might get a few questions for the same scenario, but each time you're just thinking about that question in isolation. Right, I'll read this out for you and then we'll go through some questions. You are covering a ward out of hours. An FY2 doctor, Jeremy, tells you that he will be back shortly. As the ward becomes busier, you note that Jeremy has not returned from his break. You find Jeremy asleep in the break room. You are very busy and becoming overwhelmed on the ward, so you decide to wake Jeremy. Jeremy tells you to leave him alone as he needs the rest. Okay, So if we just think about that question in terms of the key points that I pulled out, you are very welcome to pull out something different. Is that Jeremy's asleep, and is that professional? You are busy and overwhelmed, and Jeremy's asked you to leave him alone. He's challenged you, hasn't he? So leave Jeremy to sleep and carry on alone throughout the shift. How are we going to rate this? Do you want to pop in the chat what you think is the correct answer? If you want to put V or S or something instead of very or somewhat, you're welcome. Okay, inappropriate is the overwhelming response there, and I would totally agree with that. It's totally inappropriate to leave him and carry on alone. You are putting patient safety at risk. Remember that patient safety is your first focus. Next one, ask other colleagues on the ward for their support. Is this very appropriate, somewhat inappropriate, or inappropriate? I think this one's a little bit trickier than the last one, so have a good go. Yeah, so we've got very appropriate, somewhat appropriate, and somewhat inappropriate, so a whole range of answers. So if we look at what the SJT says, they go for somewhat appropriate. Now, I think here the reason they're not choosing very appropriate is because actually it is Jeremy's job to help you out. Okay, your other colleagues have probably got other patients of their own to do their own things. It's somewhat appropriate because you are still putting the patient first. Ultimately, you're improving patient care by asking your other colleagues to help out. Somewhat inappropriate, I can see why you say that, but I think it's this patient care, putting patient safety as our top priority that makes it somewhat appropriate. But you'll find that as you do these questions, especially if you do them with groups of people, you'll often put slightly different answers, and then you have a little bit of a debate as to who's got exactly the model SJT answer and who doesn't. So we've got one more here, and then we'll move on to the next type. Explain to Jeremy that you feel overwhelmed, under pressure, and need his support. What answer are we going to put here? Yeah, very appropriate. I'd agree. Absolutely everyone who's commented so far has gone for very appropriate, and that is indeed the right answer. Yeah, it's also that word explain suggests you're doing it, a bit more tactfully, you're being a bit more diplomatic, that you feel overwhelmed, under pressure, and that's why you need him. All right, so next we're going to go on to the next type of question. The ranking questions are a little bit harder, and I will try to explain the marking behind it as well, because I think sometimes when you're practicing, the spreadsheet that you get just doesn't make sense, but we'll see how you go on. So here they're giving you 5 options, and you are ranking all of those 5 options in order of the best to the worst, essentially, the most to the least appropriate. You get 38 different scenarios, and you can get a maximum of 20 marks per scenario. I'll show you how it works. So this is a grid. Now, I hope you can see my mouse. So the correct answer we can see up here is C, B, A, E, D. Okay. If you put C in first rank, you get 4 points. If you put B in second rank, you get 4 points. If you put A in third rank, you get 4 points. If you put E in fourth rank, you get 4 points. And if you put D last, you get 4 points. And that gives you a full score of 20. If you change the answer around slightly and instead you mix up the letters in the middle, so you've still got the right answer, you've still got C at the start, and you've still got D at the end, but you've got the letters in the middle wrong, then it changes slightly. So because you've now put B in third position, you get 3 points for that. Because you've now put E in second position, you're getting 2 points there. And because you've put A in fourth position, you get 3 points. But you can see, even by mixing up all the ones in the middle, if you've got the first one and the last one right, you're getting 16 out of 20 points. You're doing pretty well. Just as another example, if you only get the one in the middle right, and the first and second you put in the wrong order, and the fourth and fifth you put in the wrong order, you're actually getting 16 points. So you're still doing pretty well, okay? So when you're answering these questions, you want to think, what is the best? What is the worst? What do I think of those middle ones? Okay. If you put something in totally the wrong order and totally different, you still actually get 10 points. So you're still getting half marks for these questions. All right. So with that in our head, we're going to do a scenario. So you are checking a drugs chart on a general medical ward and you notice that the diabetes specialty trainee has prescribed double the dose of a tablet for a patient with diabetes. You are aware that sometimes double the dose of this tablet is given to patients. The patient is stable and the specialty trainee is due on the ward in a few hours. Rank in order of appropriateness the following actions in this scenario. So all 5 of these things are actions. I want you, once we've read them, to rank them from the best thing that you can possibly do to the worst thing you can possibly do. Okay? And keeping those same attributes in mind that we've had all along. So, A, do you assume the dosage is correct, as you know that sometimes the dose is doubled? B, call the specialty trainee to check the dosage with him. C, change the dose to the normal amount given. D, check with the ward pharmacist whether she is aware of the double dose of this patient. Or E, check the dosage with the specialty trainee when he comes onto the ward. So this is definitely trickier and you might want to take a little bit longer, but really focus on getting the first and the last right and seeing if you can work out the ones in the middle would be my tip. Or think, all right, well, these are definitely the top 2, these are definitely the bottom 2, and this is probably the middle. Okay, there's 2 different ways, but if you can get either of those totally correct, you're going to get 16 points, even if you don't get them in a perfect order. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes for this one because it definitely is trickier. But once you've got something, feel free to pop it in the chat. And as I've said, it doesn't matter if it's wrong because you're still going to get some points. And because we're not judging. Okay, thank you for being brave and for putting your answers in the chat. That's really appreciated. Okay, so looking at what we've got so far, a lot of people are thinking that B and D are probably the top options. And A or C is probably the worst options to go for. Okay, I'll just give everybody else another minute just in case you want to pop something in. All right, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to show you what the correct answer is here. You'll see that a lot of you are on the right track. So that is amazing. So you're doing really well. Your SJT still isn't for a few weeks or even a few months if you're doing it in January. So the correct answer is B, D, E, C, A. You can scroll up in the chat and work out what you put. So the first thing to do is to call the specialty trainee to check the dosage with him. I think that's because he's the one that's prescribed it. He is going to know the best answer to whether he meant to double it or whether they didn't mean to double it. The second one, check with the ward pharmacist whether they're aware of the double dosage for this patient, because the ward pharmacist is a great member of the MDT team and is a great person to know about the medications, and actually is probably going to be able to give you an answer. If we look at third, we're doing check the dosage with the specialty trainee when they come onto the ward. So you can see that they're coming on in a few hours, so you're leaving things for a little bit, but we also know from that text that the patient is currently stable. So it's sort of okay to leave for a few hours. If we're looking at those 2 bottom options, this is where it's slightly tricky. And I asked my housemates who aren't medics what they thought of this question, and this is where people can really agree. Option 4 is to change the dose to the normal amount given. Whereas option 5, the worst option in this, the least appropriate, is to assume the dosage is correct, as you know that sometimes the dose is doubled. And if we just think about why that is, if you're changing the dose to the normal amount given, you can't be causing any harm. You might not be giving the maximum benefit, but you can't be doing harm if it's at the normal amount. Whereas if you're assuming it's correct and actually it turns out to be incorrect, then you've given someone double the dose for medication, and that in itself may cause harm. Okay. I hope that makes sense, and if it doesn't, or if you've got a question, please pop it in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to move on. Oh, sorry, that was the grid there, so you could work out what you would have got. But we'll move on to the next little bit here. So I just wanted to spend 3 or 4 minutes just talking a little bit about the exam logistics. This exam lasts for 2 hours and 20 minutes. And if you get extra time, you already need to have applied for that. And you could get 25% extra time. And there are a number of reasonable adjustments that you can have on there, including comfort breaks and rest breaks if needed, or a reader. And coloured screens. There's a whole list. There's about 10, 12 reasonable adjustments that they can give. This year, you've got the option, like we had last year, to sit your SJT either at home or in the centre. I'd be really interested to find out which one people have done. If you just want to pop in a chat, home or centre, if you fancy. I've just got some tips for both of them. And again, on the slides, this document gives you some exact points as to whether you need thinking for home or for the centre. All right, so everyone here is at the centre so far. So what we will do is skip this. In terms of at the centre, firstly, when I was reading through this document, you need to check your ID is correct. You need to check the type of ID they're going to take, and you need to check it is in date. You do not want that panic on the day. Secondly, personally, I'd recommend preparing, really thinking about it. Have you got your ID? Do you know how long your journey is going to take? I know in Exeter, we didn't have the Pearson View Centre, so you couldn't sit it in Exeter. And what about extra time, allowing some extra time just in case things go wrong? I know they're really silly, really stupid things, but I thought I'd put them on just in case, but you need a reminder. In terms of COVID requirements, you don't want to be having to do a PCR test on the day of your test, which is definitely what happened to some of the people in my year last year. So just think about what the COVID requirements are at that point in time and make sure you're sticking to them. You can't take extra belongings such as pens and paper into that exam with you, and you definitely can't have any smartwatches. That's a reason for disqualification. Lastly, I would recommend arriving with plenty of time just in case something goes wrong. And I think the official guidance is you need to be there 15 minutes before your appointment. And then there are comfort breaks. It seems from reading the guidance that there is a 10-minute comfort break built into this year's SJT. But if you want to take extras, you can take them, but you will only get that time back if they are scheduled as a reasonable adjustment. If not, then you're just going and you're not able to get back those 3, 4, 5 minutes. Okay, I hope those are useful. I know they are really obvious, but I thought I would pop them on. Okay, the second thing is just make sure, would be my recommendation, you just have a look and you see what the reasons for dismissal from the SJT are. This is hyperlinked, but you can find this document by going to the SJT page and looking at the guidance, just because I have heard stories and know that there were quite a few appeals last year about unfair dismissal. So it'd be worth checking it out. I think that is going to be a lot less this year because they've already done the exam online once. Okay, so that is pretty much the end of the talk. What I would love to do is just leave you with a few little points and a little reminder of what we've done. And if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat whilst I'm talking. I'm very happy to answer questions about the SJT or about other things. So just to remind you, out of these 7,500 people, everyone needs to pass the SJT. The 6,800 people who are applying for the Normal Foundation programme, your SJT score is going to impact where you end up. But for the vast majority of people, they're ending up in their first choice, 75%, and if not, in their second or third. So, you know, when you come to, there's a session next week about ranking, but when you come to think about your rankings, likelihood is you're going to end up in your first, second or third choice, especially if you're doing well in your SJT. And your SJT does matter. I would recommend revising for this exam. I think now is a perfectly defined time to start, or if your exam is on the 18th of December and you want to start on the 1st, then go ahead. But I'd really recommend revising. I'd recommend using some of those resources that I've shown you. I really, really wish you good luck and I hope it goes well. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to accept them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can see or hear me. Thanks so much for that talk, Olivia. Really, really helpful and insightful. Like I said, any questions, feel free to definitely ask in the chat. Anything anyone wants to ask. We've got quite a lot of thank yous. which is reassuring and good. Yeah, so I'm not surprised because it was very, very helpful.
So someone there, Nathan, has just sent me a question, which is about how come the SJT doesn't matter for the AFP? And the answer is it does matter, and you do need to pass it. But for the majority of the AFP programs, when I was looking last year, although I would double check for the ones you've applied for, you only needed to pass the SJT, and the score you got wasn't considered in your AFP ranking. Also, the AFP is more competitive, is the answer to another question, simply because there's fewer places and there are more people applying. But that is not a reason to not go for it if you wanted to. And, you know, we were talking earlier about getting an interview. That is an amazing thing for the AFP. And, you know, if you've got to that stage, you should feel really proud of yourself. That is it. I'm done.
Great. Thanks so much. I think I have one question, if that's okay, if you don't mind. If it's helpful, like how, in terms of like prep wise, would you say there's like a optimum like time to spend like prepping, or not really?
It is really tricky, isn't it? Like, I mean, I think I spent about 2.5 weeks before the exam preparing. You know, I feel like you always read things online. It says start your revision really early, start it 3 months before. Frankly, if you were starting it now, then you'd already have lost a month of that time. I don't know, 2 to 4 weeks maybe. You know, whatever your schedule allows. Some med schools you're really busy up until the end, and some you've got an exam, and once that's out the way, you can get on with it. But yeah, little and often, I suppose, is always the best advice. And I just recommend using those resources that we've looked at.
Cool, great. That's really helpful. Thank you. Thanks so much. I don't think I've seen any more other questions apart from regarding slides. But is there anything else, any other questions anyone's asked? Again, like I said, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, now we do have put the feedback link very shortly, so you can give feedback on today and how you found today. We really use it for Olivia, for her, and also for us as well. And also, oh, 1 second, we just got another question. So if you can see that, Olivia, but it says, how did you find the time pressure in the exam? I'm not sure if you're able to answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a time pressured exam. 2 hours 20 to answer quite a lot of questions, or quite a lot of scenarios, because each scenario might have more than one question in those rating ones. Is I don't know, 2 hours 20 is a very long amount of time, but 2 hours is not a huge. But for all those questions is not huge, especially when you're having to think about everyone. I did feel the time pressure in that exam, and the best way that I can advise for preparing for that is to practice the exam beforehand. Okay, think about how are you going to organise yourself, and you know, just have a go at doing a mock. Set yourself a timer and try, or do half a mock and set yourself a timer and try for that hour and 10. Someone's just sent me a message saying if I'd mind sharing what score I got, which I'm very happy to do. I actually had to look it up because I had absolutely no idea, and I felt like it might be a question that I got. But I checked on Oriel the other day and I got 45 point something. Your SJT is to 3 decimal points, which is pretty mad. But yeah, so I did pretty well. And my SJT is the answer to that. But please fill out the feedback form, because that is the only way that Tams can improve and that I can improve as well. So please.
Great. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much. Honestly, that's really, really helpful. Like I said, the feedback form's in the chat now. So if you could fill that out, that'd be very, very helpful. In terms of the slides, I believe they'll be sent out afterwards, after today. And Liv says she's happy to share her slides as well, so that's obviously very helpful. I believe we have a video as well coming up. Just before I mentioned obviously Tams Network earlier, and this video just tells a bit more about Tams Network and a bit about the work we're doing. So if you could watch that as well before we close out. Again, if there's any more questions as well, feel free to put them in the chat.
My name's Kareem, and I am a fourth year medical student at King's College London. I am also the co-director for the Aspiring Medics Support Network. also known as Tams. And it's my absolute pleasure to announce the relaunch of the Tams network. In case you haven't heard of us, Tams is a registered community interest company dedicated to supporting aspiring medical students from socio-economically disadvantaged backgrounds within the UK. The Tams network is a branch of Tams which specifically focuses on the personal and professional development of medical students within our community. We know that medical school can be both an exciting and nerve-wracking time for many students, especially those from a socio-economically disadvantaged background, as they can find it challenging to adjust to the cultural and academic changes. Our work is just as important for the secondary school student who dreams of one day being a doctor as it is for the medical student who is mapping out their career choices. Because at the end of the day, we're all aspiring medics, we're just at different stages of our journey. We cultivate the personal and professional development of our members, specifically addressing the challenges that can come from a socio-economically disadvantaged background. We give people a place to learn, grow, and connect in ways that aren't currently supported by the medical curriculum. Our webinar series, Tams Talks, is committed to meeting your learning needs. We address under-discussed topics at medical school, such as how to manage your money, choosing a specialty, and how to study for exams. Through our mentoring program, Mentored by Tams, we provide impactful mentoring relationships that help our members grow into the best versions of themselves. We organise frequent socials for our members because we want to create a space for members to meet like-minded people and develop long-lasting relationships. To get involved, click the link in our bio to join our community. Once you do this, you'll receive exclusive access to all the incredible work the team is doing, which means you'll have the drop on the next Tams Talks, mentoring developments, and opportunities to get involved with wider Tams work. Tams Network, a place to learn, grow, and connect.
Great. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video and gives more details on how to join Tams Network and opportunities that it affords as well. Yes, so thank you so much again for coming today. I hope it was very useful for you. I know I found it very useful. As I mentioned before, this is part of a series of talks. So for final years, so we had one, like I said, last week on the PSA, and one next week will be on foundation schools and ranking, which I know, again, that's quite far away now, but it will come quicker than you think. So again, that'll be very, very useful, I'm sure, as well. There's all the talks will be up shortly on our YouTube channel, but definitely try and get in there and watch them live so you can get them as soon as possible. And yeah, so fill out the feedback form as well. And yeah, and the slides will be out in due course. Yes, I think that's everything, I believe. Yeah, I guess thank you so much again, and yeah, nice having you all.